Well, thank you. I'll try to help you learn from the mistakes that were made in Holland. But before I do so, I want to tell you something about the Dutch context. What happened in Holland that during the last decades of the last century, the government said we don't want to sprawl the housing all over the country, we want to make concentrations of new towns. So a lot of new towns were built, we were one of them, and the most new towns were designated in the 70s and 80s of the last century. And we've got a lot in common. And what we've got in common, and you can see this on the map, not quite, but is that the most Dutch new towns are located near a big mother town. As Spijkenisse is related to Rotterdam, you can see that Zoetermeer is related to The Hague, Nieuwegein is related to Utrecht, and Capelle is as well related to Rotterdam. So what we share is that we are middle grow, about 80,000 inhabitants, and that we are all near a big city. And in terms of defining your position, that's interesting, because you can try to compete with the big city, but you also can try to get close to it and to adapt the things that are offered by big cities and the suburban atmosphere that you can add to it as a new town. I'll show you something about the Spijkenisse context. The next picture, please. Spijkenisse was two very small existing villages during the half the 20th century, and we are 30 minutes from the city center of Rotterdam. There's quite a good metro, so that's very, very well. What happened to us is that the population was growing from 4,000 inhabitants to 75,000 in a couple of decades. And because we were built for the workers, for the harbor and the chemical industry, the meaning of our city was that you could work in Rotterdam, you could sleep and go to school in Spijkenisse, and that was enough. So there was very much quantity and, well, when you see it as a whole, not very much quality. I'll show you some pictures of our growth. This is 1950, and we'll scroll on. Then you see the Siam, the flats in right streets. Then we come to the next periods where very small quarters built, rather idealistic. Close to each other, with the dream of the architects that happy families should live and sit there together. But our population changed very much, and there are really a problem. And then the last part, where we are trying to complete our city, and we came to the problem of our town centers. Because we were built so very monotone, there was not much to do. The town center was small, it was unattractive, and it was mono-functional. You just could do the daily shopping, and for the rest there was nothing at all. And it was constructed during the crisis of the 1980s. So there was no money for much quality, and it was constructed during the growth, so it was too small for the population size we had now. And there was no attention to historical structure, to leisure. So we started in the 90s of the last century to rebuild our city center completely. What was an effect of the monoculture was there was and there still is an underdeveloped social cultural structure. We lack middle class. We lack a cultural, creative class, and we lack a lot of social cohesion. So that was a problem we had to do something about. Our image was like all Dutch new towns It was boring, and there was no sense of place, no feeling at home in our town. So you should do something about it, not only by the stones I'm going to tell you something about, but also by the atmosphere and the things you do in your town. We need to empower events, festivals, possibilities to meet, like little urban gardens, not as big as in Cuba, but where people can do things together. That is very important. And some of you have seen our city center when you visited Tuesday. We did a lot. We did a lot about it. We demolished very much, and we said we had to make it comfortable, cozy. So it was a radical makeover. And what we had to do also was, you can go to the next slide, to make to give the inhabitants of our town the idea that they could be proud on what happened, and that we should have attention for cultural and educational things. So we said, well, what we do is we're skipping all the middle of the road architecture. The only architecture that we allow in our city center should be of very high quality. And Sjoerd Soeters, a very famous Dutch architect, was the father of how we recreated our town center. And let me see, yes, go on and go on, because there's just illustrations. We made 2 cultural icons. We built a theater that should be a place where people can come together to the theater, and it should be of all inhabitants, and that means something for the way we program also. And we built a library, and there he is. We call it the Boekenberg, a mountain of books, and you should take that literally, because it is a mountain of books. And it is a place where you can read, where you can study, where you can come for small exhibitions and things to do. And it was rather funny because the city of Spijkenisse is one of the cities where the less people are reading from Holland. And we thought much more, so that makes it necessary that we build such an icon, and it's used very well. Well, this is our theater. Also very lovely, but go on because time goes on as well. And one of our problems is the way we go on with our houses, because everything was built in 3 decennia, very small after each other. And we've got too much of the same kind of houses. So we've got to demolish houses, we've got to reform our quarters and houses. And that's not very easy because it's not we are not the owner. And the time they were built is so short that there is a high value still resting on those houses. So demolishing is has very high cost. So we're doing it, but it goes together with a lot of cultural and even kijken. Well, I forgot the word. I'll come over it. But it's got to maintain, and it's got to be low cost energy for the people who live there and who will remain there, because we've got to break that monotony we've got. And what we see is that our population, the people that started in those houses, are aging and are getting older and have no money to change their houses. But they've got no possibility to live somewhere else. So that's a challenge as well. And when we go to the next, you see we're living near the harbor. And that means that the most people who live in Holland, live in Spijkenisse, work in the harbor. And what we see that the way you the way the harbor exists, it's gonna change very much. So there's a challenge to keep our young people ready to stay to work in the harbor. Go on. Well, you see something about where we lay. It's near. It's in between the city and the nature. So that is very good, and that's why we think we shall maintain, because there will always be a need of a suburban surrounding where you can live near the town, but where you have the rest and the green to have a pleasant life, although there's not everything. So I will end here. Thank you very much.